Hey, welcome to my channel, Pop Icons, and today I'm going to be talking to you about how to authenticate artist-owned guitars. So it's very specific today, and I wanted to share some advice and tips before somebody kind of took the plunge and invested in something very expensive. Um, so so in case you don't know, my name is Lawrence. I own a company called Pop Icons. It specialises in high-end music memorabilia. I also collect music memorabilia. I collect a bit of everything really, whatever I have a passion for. Personally, when it comes to music memorabilia, I'm a big fan of Oasis and the Verve, so I tend to look out for their memorabilia. So I have a collection of Noel Gallagher's guitars. I collect Oasis signed posters, concert posters. I have a few bits from the Verve, a few signed albums. There's not too much Verve memorabilia out there, but anyhow, yeah. And I collect like some toys, from the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I collect stuff from my youth, but but besides the personal stuff, I own a company and it specialises in artist-owned guitars, stage-worn costumes, handwritten lyrics, awards, anything rare and unique. But today I'm focusing on giving you some advice about what to consider if you're going to be purchasing artist-owned guitars. Usually these are very expensive pieces of memorabilia, so it's really important to check before you take the leap, and make sure what you're buying is authentic. So yeah, where will I start? I suppose like the key thing when it comes to artist-owned guitars is, does it come with any documentation? Does it come with any paperwork? So what I mean by paperwork is does it come with a signed letter from the artist? Does it come with a letter from the artist's manager or their publicist or their guitar tech or somebody like that? And that's really important because, if you're buying say like an Eric Clapton guitar, if the guy who's selling it to you is saying that it was owned and used by Eric Clapton and it comes with a letter from somebody you've never heard of, well, that's not really ideal. Like, you don't want a letter from Joe Blogg down the street. You want a letter signed by Eric Clapton himself. Excuse me, Eric Clapton. Or a letter signed by his manager or his guitar tech or somebody intrinsically connected with the artist. So that's the key thing, really. Whoever signed that document needs to be linked to the artist, like intrinsically, like their manager. Not just like a crew member who worked with some third party company at a one-off gig. That's not ideal. You're looking for someone who's really linked to the artist, so that it gives you some trust in the letter, of provenance. You want to be able to trust. It's all about trust at the end of the day. So the closer the person is to the artist, if not the artist themselves, it helps you build trust. And that's a key thing when it comes to buying a piece of memorabilia. It's where do you trust it to be authentic? That's the key thing, and it also affects the value of the item. So like, I gave Eric Clapton as an example there. So like, really, if you wanted to buy an Eric Clapton guitar, the ideal scenario is, when it comes to the documentation, is that, say, Eric Clapton had a few charity auctions over the last decade or so. So if you were to buy a guitar that was sold at one of those auctions, so somebody was at the auction, they bought the guitar, and now they're deciding to sell it. What you'd want to make sure what comes with that, for each auction was a bit different, but for the Bonham's auctions, each item sold at the auction was accompanied by a signed certificate of authenticity, and the certificate was hand signed by Clapton himself. So you can't really get any better than that. So ideally, if you were buying that guitar, I'd expect that you get a copy of the original invoice, you know, so the Bonham's invoice, um, the original certificate, all the Bonham's tags, they'd be attached to the guitar, and yeah, that's it. And I suppose, like, ideally the, the description in the catalogue mentions the serial number, so you make sure that the serial number in the catalogue matches the serial number on the actual guitar. That's, you know, that's really important, because somebody could be providing you with all the paperwork, but if there's no serial number to match the paperwork with the guitar, then how are you meant to really know that it's the same guitar that was sold at that auction? It's unlikely that somebody would swap the guitars around. But look, I'm talking about the ideal scenario. So, yeah, the serial number is really a key piece of information that needs to be on the documentation, and it needs to match the serial number on the guitar. So, also then, like, so that's the ideal scenario, and then the kind of not so ideal scenario would be like somebody's offering you a Clapton guitar, and the documentation is signed by John Smith, and you don't know who John Smith is. The letter just literally says, "To whom it may concern, I authenticate that this guitar was owned and used by Eric Clapton. Yours sincerely, John Smith." And you're like, who? I don't know who's this John Smith person. You Google them and you can't find any information. And so basically the letter could have been typed up by anybody, you know. So that doesn't hold any value. So I wouldn't go near a guitar like that, you know. It's just not. It's too risky. So yeah. So really the focus is on documentation, you know. And the documentation, it doesn't have to be on paper. Sometimes, primarily 99% of the time, it is like a paper document. But you might also get like a combination of video footage. You could get an artist who is authenticating the piece via video. And ideally, same again, in that scenario, you really want the artist to call out the serial number so that you can link the guitar with the guitar he's talking about with the physical guitar. Because I had a scenario one time with a Ed Sheeran guitar I was offered, and I asked, did it come with any documentation? And he said, oh yeah, it comes with video footage of Ed Sheeran authenticating it. And it came with a video of Ed just saying that he's donating a guitar, but he didn't mention the serial number or what it was used for, so there's no way to link the actual physical guitar with the one that Ed's talking about in the video. So like anybody could use that video footage and put it together with a guitar, like, so, you know. And that's just because Ed Sheeran wouldn't kind of be too keyed up on what a collector really needs, like, and whoever was running the charity auction, they were included in either. But like, yeah, in those scenarios, like if you're bidding, say if you have an opportunity to buy something at a charity auction and it's an artist owned guitar and it's like 100%, you know, it was owned by Ed Sheeran, what I would do in that scenario is I'd contact the auction company. I'd ask if it comes with any signed documentation, and if it doesn't, I'd ask them, would it be possible for them to provide some documentation, ideally signed by Ed Sheeran himself or signed by at least the auction company, and for them to put all the appropriate details in the letter, you know. So because you have to think further down the line, you know, as much as you're passionate about the artist and you're a collector, say you're just a collector and you just want to add it to your collection, at some stage down the line, it's going to be sold, you know. Be a worst case scenario, you pop your clogs, pass away, and it's left to your family, and they mightn't have a clue what it is or if it's worth anything. And without the documentation, which proves that it was owned and used by an iconic artist, it could end up being sold for a lot less than what you paid for it, or a lot less than what it's actually worth. So, you also need to think about the future. And besides the worst case scenario, like that you'll pass away, though that will eventually happen, like whether you like it or not. Uh, like you, as much as you might be passionate about the artist today, in 5 years' time, you might have moved on and you're not so passionate about the artist, and you might need some money, or you just might want to get rid of it for whatever reason. So you're going to need to sell it. So if you're going to be trying to sell it, you want to be putting yourself in the best possible position to get the most money for the item. And the way to do that is to make sure that it comes with really solid provenance and documentation, you know. So it's really important that you ask the right questions at the start, you know. And usually these things are sold through auctions. So you just contact the auctioneer and you ask them what paperwork accompanies the guitar, and ask to see the paperwork, read the paperwork, and judge it for yourself. Does it contain the serial number? Who has signed the letter of provenance? What does the provenance document state? Does it state what the guitar was used for, its history? Like, does it mention that it was used to record an iconic song? It was used to write an iconic song? Was it just a studio guitar? I don't know. Just ask the questions. Don't be afraid to ask the questions, because most of the auction companies, especially if it's a charity auction, they're actually in the position to create the document. Then that's at the point where it can be created if it hasn't done already. But in other scenarios, you might be bidding in an auction and it's already passed, the guitar has passed through a few hands, so there's no more provenance to be added to it. So if it hasn't been established at the very start of its journey, then it's just kind of lost to a certain extent. Let me see what else. Yeah, just like regarding the history of the guitar, it's very important, because if you're buying an artist's own guitar, like if it's from an iconic artist, you're looking at probably a minimum of, really around 10,000 upwards, 10,000 up to now it's going into like $6 million, that kind of price range, but like for there's different entry levels, depending on how much money you have and how much money you want to spend. If it's a business investment, or if it's for passion, or a bit of both, it's all relative, to the collector or dealer, or so. But either way, you gotta establish the history of the guitar, so, and all the value is tied up in its provenance. So, is it the guitar that Jimmy Page used to write Stairway to Heaven? If it's that guitar, the paperwork needs to state that Jimmy Page used that guitar to write Stairway to Heaven. That would increase its value astronomically, obviously. But the documentation needs to state that, because otherwise, who's to know if that's the guitar that he used to write that song? These artists use loads of different guitars, and when it comes to writing songs and recording songs, it's very hard to find out what guitars they use to record what. It's lots of times there's no photographs taken during the recording process, and even if there are photographs taken where you might be able to see the guitar that the artist is using, like sometimes the pictures aren't great quality, or you don't know. You see the artist using the guitar in the studio, but you don't know what song they're recording at that moment. You might have the rare occasion where the photographer has actually made a note and has stated, like in the description of the photograph, that this photograph is taken at the moment, say like Oasis were recording cigarettes and alcohol, but like, yeah, so but going back to the documentation, primarily you want the documentation to state as much about the history as possible, as much detail as possible. The more the better, but just make sure it's accurate and correct and true. What else have we got? The serial number. Like, it's really, really, really important that the documentation has the exact same serial number that's on the guitar. Otherwise it's just not ideal if it doesn't have the serial number on it. Like, it doesn't mean that it's not authentic or that it's not the real deal. It's just better. It's obviously better. And yeah, it's also important to trust your gut instincts. Does everything add up? Does the provenance does the documentation look authentic? Does it feel authentic? Does the story add up? The person who signed the document, are they trustworthy? Maybe just Google the person, do some research and check, like, you might find some information online that may lead you to believe that maybe this person isn't a trustworthy source of provenance, or there's something about it that just doesn't feel right to you. So in that instance, you might decide that, what, it's not ticking all the boxes, so maybe I'll let this one pass, and I'll hopefully something better will come along in the future. What else have you got? Yeah, I'll give you some examples from my experience, like, regards to paperwork and provenance. Like, I bought a George Michael stage worn costume before, and it came with it was originally given away in a competition, and it was then consigned to an auction, and I bought it through the auction, and I asked what provenance accompanied the costume, and it came with a letter signed by George Michael's personal publicist, and yeah, so I was happy with that. So I could contact the publicist and just verify that this was authentic. In other instances, I have like guitars that have come directly from Noel Gallagher. They come with a handwritten note from Noel Gallagher where he's explained the history of the guitar, the serial number, and also comes with a photograph of Noel with the guitar. Yeah, I have other documentation, like from Jimmy Page, where Jimmy has made a video and he reads the serial number out of the guitar, he plays the guitar, and he also then writes a document with the serial number, and he also explains the history of the guitar. So fine buying memorabilia, that's the type of provenance I'm looking for. Also though, like, trustworthy sources of provenance could be a famous guitar shop, a really trustworthy guitar dealer or guitar shop, so a letter from them, a copy of their invoice, stating the history of the guitar, that can be enough as well, so it really comes down to trust. A lot of it is down to trust, that's a key component. But how that trust is established is usually it's through the documentation, so the more watertight the documentation is, the more trust that can be established. The higher value the item will have, the better investment it is, the more enjoyment you can get out of it, because you know for sure that this is authentic. But look, sometimes like, as a collector, you might just it might just kind of tick enough boxes that you're willing to take a punt on it, and in the back of your head that it may or may not be authentic, but you don't really care too much. It's not that expensive an item. But when it comes to the really expensive items, it's ideally to sway on the side of caution. What else have I got here? Also, yeah, if it, like, just because something is being sold by a big auction company, or through a charity auction, don't just presume it's authentic. But, like, authenticity needs to be proved. It's not like a given. It really needs to be proved. And even if it like it is 100% authentic, and you know it is, but it doesn't come with any paperwork, what's going to happen in 10 years time when you try sell it, and you what can like and you have the invoice from the auction, but it doesn't say anything in the invoice. It just says lot number 60, uh, you know, Robert Plant stage worn costume, but it doesn't say anything about its provenance. Like that's a bit kind of wishy washy, you know. So like, yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions, you know. And if you don't get any answers, or the answers don't quite add up, well, that's telling you something in itself, like, you know. So make your own mind up, you know. It needs to feel right for you, but think about the future. And then let me see, like, there's two more things I'll finish up with. This is something I've learned, is if it doesn't quite tick all the boxes, you know, I know sometimes you kind of have the goo to buy something and add it to your collection. Maybe you haven't bought something in a while, especially with guys who buy guitars. Like, it's kind of like this insatiable desire to have more guitars. Can never have enough. But like, if you're gonna drop a lot of money on a guitar, always remember that if it doesn't tick all the boxes, something better is going to come along. It always does. Something better will come along. So try to trust that. From my experience, that's been true, you know. So don't be afraid to let something pass with the belief that something better is going to come along. And then when something better does come along, it reinforces that, okay, if you're looking for a real quality, you know, really quality provenance, you know, genuine article, then wait until that comes up, like, because there's no point having something that doesn't quite hit the mark for you. It's, you know, you'll always have that doubt in your mind. So let those ones pass and focus on the quality items. Also, like that you're also kind of guaranteeing or increasing the probability of making a profit when you sell it in the future, or at least protecting the value of the item, you know, for the foreseeable future. And the last thing I'll mention, let me see, yeah, is to, like, just on that note, if you're going to be selling it on in the future, to think ahead before you purchase this item. If I'm going to sell this, ask yourself, if I'm going to sell this in the future, what will someone ask for? What if I'm selling it in an auction company? What's the auction company going to ask for? They're going to ask for provenance, proof, authenticity. So do I have that right now? If the answer is no, then I need to get it before I pay for it. Make sure you get the provenance verified before you hand over any money, because as soon as you hand over payment, you've lost all your power. So get that information now, and protect yourself for the future, you know, because as much as it's a passion and you're a collector, you know, it's also an investment, and it's an investment you'd hopefully want to get your money back, at least what you paid for it, and ideally make a profit, you know. Why not, you know? So yeah, so look, I'll leave it at that. Thanks for tuning in. If you have any questions, just put them in the comment box below, and I'll answer whatever I can, you know, if it's relevant. And like and subscribe to this page. I'll be sharing more videos about, you know, my advice and opinion on like autographs, authentic autographs, and, you know, other types of memorabilia, like how to authenticate stage worn costumes, and yeah, awards and those kind of things. So yeah, just general yeah, conversations about music memorabilia, and probably memorabilia in general, you know, whatever works. So thanks for tuning in, and check out my other videos. Take it easy, boy.